This is the second part of the central nervous system lecture. This is just a brief couple of slides about the spinal cord. So the spinal cord is pictured in yellow here. You can see that it starts right up at the brainstem, the medulla oblongata, and it extends down to the T12 region of the vertebrae. Of the vertebral column. So remember that the C region up here is, there are 8 cervical vertebrae, and then there are 12 thoracic vertebrae. And at the bottom of those thoracic vertebrae, we have the sort of ending of the spinal cord, and it from this point branches into several nerves known as the cauda equina. The spinal cord is very important. It is a two-way conduction pathway. So it's the integration center where you're having information coming in from the body and heading up to the brain, and then also information from the brain out to the body. So we have information being conducted in both directions along the spinal cord. And at the same time, it's a major reflex center, meaning that sometimes the spinal cord itself acts as the integration center, and the signal never needs to go all the way to the brain. We have an incoming signal from a sensory neuron. That incoming signal is immediately integrated in the spinal cord, and the motor neuron sends out the signal. This is faster so that we have certain reflexes where your body is avoiding danger. It's beneficial to have those happen very quickly. Okay, if we look at this cross section of the spinal cord, we can see that there's gray matter on the inside and white matter on the outside. We can also see that there are a couple of layers of meninges covering the spinal cord. So again, that's the connective tissue layer, same layers that are covering the brain. And we can see nerves that are branching out from the spinal cord. There are nerves leaving the spinal cord from each level. So in between every 2 vertebrae, you'll have a little hole where the nerves can pass through. Lastly, you can see the central canal here. The central canal is filled with cerebrospinal fluid, and that's the same cerebrospinal fluid that is flowing and sort of traveling around in the ventricles and arachnoid space of the brain. It then flows down through the central canal. Okay, so remember that white matter is myelinated axons and gray matter is mostly cell bodies. We can see here that a lot of our cell bodies are found in the middle part of the spinal cord, in this sort of H-shaped region of gray matter. It's also described as being butterfly-shaped. Specifically, in the dorsal or posterior horns, which is this sort of pointy part on the dorsal surface of the spinal cord, we have interneurons. So remember, interneurons are sort of the go-between. They take in information from sensory neurons and send that information out to other neurons. In the ventral or anterior horns are our cell bodies of motor neurons. And we'll see how all this sort of comes together. We're going to look at the pathway of information as it goes through the spinal cord. But just keep in mind that we've got interneurons here and motor neurons here. Okay. The exterior white matter, it's white because these are axons that are coated with a myelin sheath, a fatty substance that appears white. The axons are carrying information. Some are carrying information out from the spinal cord to the effectors of the body. Some are carrying information into the spinal cord. The outgoing signals are going to be found here in the anterior root, and the incoming signals are going to be found here in the dorsal root. And when they merge together, the region where before they split up into dorsal and ventral, this is called the spinal nerve. So information is coming in towards our spinal cord through the spinal nerve. It then branches and it's going to go through the dorsal root, and then there's going to be an interneuron here that processes the information, and then the motor neuron is going to send out a response. That response comes out through the ventral root and then back into the spinal nerve. So the spinal nerve actually has information going in both directions. If we look at this picture, it actually shows us where the cell bodies of the neurons are and where the axons are. So this is a picture of a spinal reflex, meaning that the spinal cord is the integration center. The signal is not going all the way to the brain. We can see that a pin is poking the pain receptors here, and that information is being carried in through the spinal nerve. The cell body of that sensory neuron is here in a region known as the dorsal root ganglion. And a ganglion is just a bundle of cells, a bundle of nerve cells in this case. So you'll have a bunch of these here. The picture only shows one, but there are going to be many cell bodies in this region. The signal then is traveling into the dorsal horn of the spinal cord. Here's our interneuron. We can see that it's found over in the dorsal horn as well. And that interneuron then communicates with our motor neuron. Here's the cell body of our motor neuron. It's in the anterior horn. Here's the myelinated axon of our motor neuron, leaving the spinal cord through the ventral root, again winding up in the spinal nerve, and then heading out to the effector, which in this case is a muscle. When you get poked with a pin, the response is to quickly pull your muscle away. This is the last slide for this presentation, and it just sort of talks about everything that we looked at in the previous picture. So again, we've got the sensory neuron. It has its cell body in the dorsal root ganglia, and the axons of those sensory neurons enter the spinal cord via the dorsal root. The interneuron is found in the dorsal horn of the gray matter. And then the motor neuron, the cell body is going to be in the ventral horn, and the axons send out information through the ventral root.